Jordan Morgan, and I've sat down at a 1-2 no limit table here today. Haven't played any hands. Still waiting to post my blind. Seems like a fairly good table. Everyone has deep stacks. Kind of like to avoid short stackers. A half stack's okay. Still get to play a lot of poker with the half stack. The short stacks, because a lot of the times they'll just shove it in pre-flop and they take a lot of play out of the games. And if there's another player, you know, that's got a deep stack and you're wanting to play a pot with them, short stackers tend to get in the way of that and just take a lot of play out of the game. So I like tables with full stacks when possible. Table selection is, you know, it's a big part of winning at poker. You should always, you know, try and put yourself on tables where you have the best chance of winning money and the most money. Got Queen 6 off in the big blind here. He raises. This isn't a hand I'm going to defend with. Usually I won't get involved with the complete trashy hands like that and King 2 offsuit unless a very specific reason to. Like here, I don't see any reason to get involved. Especially early in a session, I like to play it kind of tight and get a feel for what the other guys on the table are doing. I'll open a pretty wide range on the button. King 10 off's definitely a raise. You like to play position more aggressively than out of position. Three bet by a short stack. He hasn't been at the table long. I haven't really seen anything out of him. King 10's not a very strong hand. I think it's probably just a fold. Here I've got King Queen. I'm going to raise. And King Queen, again, you know, if they re-raise me, it's not about having the best hand or being ahead or behind of them. It's kind of about how your hand will play post-flop against the range of hands they might have. So you really want to have a hand that's going to be fairly easy to play post-flop. You don't want to, you know, be flopping top pair against a guy who's going to have a top pair and a better top pair, or a better kicker. Here I'm just going to make a standard continuation bet with top pair. I like to bet fairly close to the size of the pot whenever there's a lot of draws out there. And this guy just called fairly quickly. I don't think it's very likely he has me beat. Could have a worse queen. Probably try and go for more value. The only hand we've seen this guy is he doubled up and had a pretty big hand and got the money in quickly. Here he's just been calling. Now, I think there's a chance he might call me with the worst queen, but this is a spot where I like to check because all the draws missed and maybe give him a chance to bluff at it, or if he does have me beat, he's can't shove over my raise. Let's see what he had there. Oh, he had the bottom pair. He's looser than I thought he was. So now that I've seen that he's shown down the bottom pair and calling two streets, I'm probably going to be going for value against this guy. I'm going to play my hands straightforwardly. King 5's fold. I'm going to play my hands very straightforward against him whenever I have a top pair, a better type hand. I will bet it strong and hope that he pays me off with the worst hand. Since he wasn't showing a lot of aggression there and he was just calling down, and earlier I saw him show aggression with a strong hand, and here he's showing aggression. Let's see what he shows down here to change our read. But this is the kind of stuff you want to be thinking about, is you know, how they play specific hands, and if they're going for, if they're playing their weak hands aggressively, if they're just calling them down, trying to get to showdown, or here he raised the flop and just called the turn. But once I've seen a guy call me down with bottom pair, I definitely will go for value. on 3 streets. I won't be checking top pair to him again. Let's see what he had. He had top 2 pair there and just called on the turn, so I guess he can slow down at some points, but pretty much going to raise a pair from any position. Just they play well, and especially whenever you're getting called in spots and you can flop a set and play for a big pot. This is the second time he's 3-bet me here. If he 3-bets me a couple more times, I might want to play back at him, but you're just not getting the odds in most situations to call a 3-bet with a small pocket pair. You want to just be folding those and moving on. You have to have a pretty good idea that you're going to get paid to call bets with to call 3-bets with the small pocket pairs. You can sometimes get away with it with a very deep stack, but really you have to have a read to that you're going to get paid. Against 3-bets in these games where they play fairly aggressively, and I'm starting to learn that even the 1-2 games play aggressively, you really want to be here I'm just going to fold the 5-9, but what I was saying is in these games you really want to be folding a lot of your middle to smallish pairs to 3-bets just because they don't play well, especially out of position. Probably 9s or 10s I'm not going to fold, but hands like 8s, 7s, you know, it's just your hand doesn't play well enough out of position to call 3-bets. You notice I don't limp ever. I don't think whenever I'm the first into the pot in these games. You really want to keep the aggression level up to keep the pressure on your opponents. Like here, this is a spot where I'll put in a 3-bet, and you'll notice I won't call a 3-bet with king queen, but I'm more likely to 3-bet it myself, where I take the lead. And that way you can define your hand strength a little more and figure out if you're good and you should go for value, and you can also help you get away from top pair in some situations where you need to. If you're just checking and calling, like if you just call a raise with king queen and the flop comes queen high and you're just checking and calling, you'd never really know if your kicker's good, if your hand's good, and you're just kind of playing the guessing game. Whereas if you're betting and raising and you put in a big, like almost a pot-sized bet with the top pair and a guy raises you, it more clearly defines his hand strength, and you can figure out if he has you beat. And it's not very likely that a guy is going to have nothing there. Some guys, once you get a read on a guy, you can say that he's got nothing here more than he's got my top pair beat. But for the most part, if you put in a big bet and the guy raises you, he's going to have top pair, weak kicker beat. Most of the time these guys will take their, like we saw J-Bob do earlier, they'll take their bottom and middle pairs to showdown and they won't be playing them aggressively. So unless you have reason to think otherwise, that's pretty well the way you should play it. I'm going to go ahead and open 6-7 off here. I folded queen 9 off from this position earlier, but the 6-7 plays a little better post flop. You can, like here we flopped a gut shot, and you can flop a few more hands with 6-7 than queen 9. And you're not going to be in there with the top pair type hand. Here he makes a weakish bet into 2 players. This just isn't a spot I'm going to give that bet a lot of credit. I'm going to go ahead and put in a raise here. This is not a spot I would raise all the time, but against this player, the way he's been playing, I just don't give that a lot of credit. And also, if he does have an ace, I don't think he's going to 3-bet us here. We saw him slow down with the aces and 8s earlier. So it gives us a free shot to maybe hit a 4, and then he might still pay us off big. Now we've turned a double gut shot here. We can catch an 8 or a 4. and he's bet again. I don't think he's going to fold to a raise here, but we're getting, almost 4-1 immediately, and we're only about 4 or 5 to 1 to hit our hand, and I think we can get paid on the river, so I'm going to call and not raise. Now if he bets, I'm just going to give up. I don't think he's the kind of guy that's ever going to fold a hand, and it's a pretty weak bet, but unless you have a very specific reason to think he'll fold, and we definitely don't have any reason to think this guy's going to fold, you just don't want to be making plays. So, we lost a few dollars there, but we had a lot of outs, and I think we had a lot of fold equity on the flop. You'll notice that I reloaded to 200 instantly whenever I went below it. Whenever I'm playing these 6-max no-limit games, I'll have my auto-reload feature set just because I want to have the most possible at all times. Here it looks like this hand was only dealt 4-handed, so I'm going to raise with a little bit wider range, and ace-5 suited from the cutoff is a raise. When it goes from 6 to 5-handed, the games don't play a lot differently. You can open a little bit wider range from the under the gun and the cutoff positions. But for the most part, the 6-handed and 5-handed play about the same. And then when it gets to 4-handed, you'll want to start making some adjustments. Here I'm just going to play my button aggressively because I feel like I can outplay my opponents, and especially with position, I'm just not going to be folding an ace. I noticed that Ed Guess has 3-bet me a couple times, and so it was my button with the ace that I raised. And when a guy 3-bets you a couple times early in a session, you don't want to give that too much credit. Like, too often you'll say, oh, he's 3-bet me twice, he's picking on me, he doesn't have a hand, whatever. A lot of the time it can just be that the guy has a hand. So until he's 3-bet you 4, 5, 6 times in a session, you really don't want to be making any plays back at him. But so I'll still open his button after he's 3-bet me twice, but once he started doing it 3 or 4 times, I'm going to be 3-betting with the intention of re-raising him or making a play on the pot once he puts in another 3-bet, because he's just not going to have the hand he's representing very often. Here I've got the ace-3 suited in the small blind. It's unopened to me, and I'll raise the suited ace from the small blind. Although you should probably be opening a fairly wide range from the small blind, because most people are not that loose in their big blind. They're fairly tight defending it, so you can pick up just the blinds a fairly large percentage of the time. Once you've done this and a guy isn't folding his big blind, you should probably tighten up your range, but if you have any reason to think they're folding fairly often, you should probably be sticking in a raise. This guy's limped his button. It's not a very strong play. Sometimes I'll raise here, but with a hand like this that can flop, a big flush and a big hand, I'll take a flop cheap when I can get it. I'll definitely be raising like ace-8 and above whenever I get a weak button limp back with that, and sometimes I'll just raise any 2 just to see how they'll play it, but you kind of want to have more of a read to start doing those things. There's only $6 in the pot. I mean, bottom pair, I don't really see any reason to make a bet, or there's no value in betting and no value in calling a bet probably. Got a pair of 7s on the button. This is a great hand to make a raise with. You'll notice that I usually raise pot from most positions. You can feel free to vary your raise size, but I just like to keep it consistent and make sure that no one can get too much of a read on me based on something silly like a bet size pre-flop. Here I'm going to go ahead and open ace-3 from the cutoff. You know, I raise a lot of hands. If you don't want to, you don't have to raise that many, but these guys seem to be giving my raises a lot of respect. Haven't re-raised me since Ed did. Here's a spot where I'll raise a pair. Like I said earlier, I'll raise a pair from just about any position in these games. It's good to take the betting lead. And all right, now here's a spot where I will call it 3-bet. These tiny 3-bets, I don't give a lot of respect to. I mean, sometimes there'll be huge hands, and sometimes there'll be very weak hands that you can take the pot from, even out of position. So this is a spot where I'm going to call. Comes out a paired flop. He's got the aggression lead. I'll just check it to him and see what he does. Bet that very quickly. For some guys, betting it very quickly means it's a bluff, but more often than not, I'll give them the benefit of the doubt and for having a hand and just give up. You know, he could just be betting ace-king or ace-queen here, but a lot of people will check those hands behind and try and take the hand to showdown once they've been called pre-flop. There's no reason to think this guy is on a move there. That's the very small 3-bet is not a tactic I'll use very often, and I can't really see much of a reason for it. If you're wanting to steal the pot, you want to make it more difficult for your opponent to call. If you actually have a big hand, you want to get value on your hand whenever your opponent calls. So usually a bigger 3-bet is a better idea. Here we finally picked up a hand of 2 kings in the small blind. You'll notice the last hand this player raised from the button, and I've been playing tight, so maybe the people start to think they can run over me a little bit, but I'm going to go ahead and raise just a little bit more than pot since I'm out of position, and J-Bob doesn't seem to mind to play big pots. He calls me here, and we'll remember this is a guy we were wanting to get 3 streets of value out of, and so we're just going to go ahead and bet. Make a bet that we think he might call. That completes a straight for 6-9, but it doesn't really change much. He just called. I would expect him to have been more aggressive with the hand that beats us here. So we're going to bet again and hope that he'll call us with the worse hand. And if he folds, that's all right too, because there are a lot of draws. Now this is an interesting card. Completes the flush draw, and if he was calling us down with ace high, he would beat us. It's also a card that could scare him, so if we bet, he's probably not going to call us with the hand that beats us. So I think I'll just check here and hope that he checks behind. Saw him slow down with the aces and eights earlier, so we might not even bet a hand that beats 2 kings. You know, this is a spot where he limped. We've identified him as a player that's going to play a lot of pots and call a lot of bets very lightly. He called us down with the bottom pair for 2 streets earlier. He elected to call my large raise pre-flop. And this is a pretty ideal flop. You really like the low paired flops because it's hard for the other player to have trips. There's only 2 cards out there. You know, they might not be playing hands with those cards in them. And so with aces, I'll slow play a flop like this sometimes. But with kings, you just want to go for value and try and get a guy to make a play at you. Or if the guy is like J-Bob, we would like him to call us down. So we made a bet. He called. Turn put a lot more draws on board, but didn't really change things. There are no hands that he could call us with on the flop to beat us on the turn. It's unlikely he has 6-9, so we go for another bet. And then the scariest card in the deck essentially comes off in the ace of diamonds. I was unsure if he might have an ace. I thought he would check it behind even if he did, so I wasn't scared of him getting value out of me. And I just didn't think there were hands that he would call me with on the river with such a scary card. Since That's what you have to remember in these situations. It's a scary card for you. It's a scary card for him too. So it takes a lot of the value out of the hand. And so I liked it to check, and he checked behind a weaker hand, and we won a sizable pot. I think we ended up booking a small win on the session. It took us a little while to identify the players. We identified several players we should be getting a lot of value out of, and that's what it takes to win at poker sometimes. You can't expect to come in and just win tons of large pots. You have to identify players, and you have to make reads, and that's how you book a win.